Hey guys, we are back. You all may remember the last episode we did with our producer Roger. Producer Roger is back in the building. This time he's going to be asking both questions to Tashira and to myself about internet things that we may or may not know. We actually have no idea what he's going to ask us, and I'm excited because this is new.
Thank you, Margo. So I'll ask you both first. Have either of you heard of this term manosphere that is out there on the internet?
No.
I've never heard of that.
It's the term applied to the whole online community of people that are, it's mostly kind of right-wing websites, bloggers, and influencers. And they're kind of cultivating this worldview based on like pretty outdated gender politics. And you always have these groups of like men's rights activists,
Yeah.
or which you probably have come across before, or like in the pickup artist world has been, people have talked about that for a while, which is totally tied into it. But as it's continued to grow and grow, there's more and more influencers online that are targeting a certain kind of man generally, and it's not just men that are, influencers in the space. There are women in the space too. We've talked about trad wives before. A lot of this is proliferated really, I think, through shorts. That's been shorts, whether it's a reel on Instagram, a short on YouTube, or TikTok. A lot of this content is in very small sound bites often, and it's shared by, not just the creators themselves, but a lot of their audiences, which become kind of like their little armies in a way. Because a lot of these folks end up being pretty outrageous a lot of the time.
So are a lot of these folks deplatformed and then other people?
Totally. So you think of someone like Andrew Tate, he's got to be the biggest name probably in the space. And he's been deplatformed on almost everything. And so his audience will then take that content, repurpose it, and share it. So even when these folks get deplatformed, their content doesn't really go away so much.
For people in our audience who may not know, because I know Margo was quoted in an Andrew Tate article. Who is Andrew Tate and what role does he play in the manosphere?
I was asked to make a statement about Andrew Tate last year, and I hadn't ever heard of him actually, but I did a little research in preparation for my interview, and he is someone who has millions and millions, or had millions and millions of followers on YouTube, I believe, and on Instagram, and proliferated just misogynistic hate about women and women's bodies. Very toxic, very rape, R-wordy. And to producer Roger's point, kind of affirming some of these tropes around what it means to be in a relationship, like a man and a woman, and gender roles, and women as subservient to men, and really just there for men's pleasure, to have children, do domestic things. And he was deplatformed many times for violent rhetoric.
I think there are certain people in our audience who may not know who Andrew Tate is, and they may not be a part of like this echo chamber, but it doesn't mean that it's not spilling out to more diverse communities. It just shows up differently. But the root of this like patriarchal, right-winged rhetoric, ultra-conservative, violent, honestly, in my opinion, it's the same. It just kind of shows up a little different. I have an example that I can share with that probably later in the episode. In fact, I think it's more harmful because it's not as much in your face. It's wrapped in something else. It's wrapped in the hotel. And so it seems like it is actually something that as it lures you in is going to be helpful and help your social political analysis to understand the world. But on the other side of it, it is very, very harmful to women, trans people, queer people, etc.
Absolutely. And it's especially the men in this space kind of end up appealing to other men that are watching is by being ultra masculine, right? And sort of being this, like Andrew Tate was an MMA fighter, who was, very successful. So like they start off with some kind of credibility, something that makes them something aspirational. Right now, he and his brother they're in Romania and they're under arrest for human trafficking kind of stuff.
Wait,
so
what?
yeah.
What?
Yeah, so their whole thing was like basically they built all of the money that they have, which is fairly extensive, was all built off of cam girls essentially. So all of their money out of that space, and so it sort of plays into the way that they view women at all.
Yes, of course.
I think in that, and it also gives this picture, especially to men that I think the incel or the ones that have a hard time, dating and things like that, they present this picture of being, super masculine, and then having all of this control over attractive women. It's very, I mean, it's super messed up. They all end up kind of creating like their own academies and things like that to teach you how to be, I mean, for Andrew Tate, it's how to be a top G, or to like how to start businesses. Like they will jump into like these kind of entrepreneurial spaces too.
I just got to make a parallel here, because when you talk about commodifying this personality type, it is so dangerous because we see it all the time. If you are someone who spends time online, if you create content, these pivots from look at me, I'm so great, to let me tell you how I'm so great. They have, I mean, I have a master class, right? It happens all the time. And so it becomes scary when people begin to leverage their influence, and they are influencing in such a harmful way. And then they begin to profit off of it. So I just had to stop you there, because that's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Oh yeah. And then when they start to get attacked, I mean, it's starting to blame. So Andrew Tate calls like the whole world like the Matrix or something, and that we're trying to, squash his ability to talk to you. Like he's,
But he's the martyr.
You kind of get to a certain place, people start attacking you, and then you can start this martyrdom kind of thing and get people that are just, more and more committed to you, I think. And it's so hard to tell how many of these folks actually believe the things that they're saying, or how much of it is done for money and power, but the effect is the same. A lot of this stuff gets pushed, like young men, like real, like teens, like preteens and things like that, and I think that's where it's especially scary. And it's like, these kids are, obviously very vulnerable, and like everything is scary to them at this point, and they want, and they see someone that's like quote unquote successful in the ways that they want to be, and it's also like it's a little bit contrarian, in a way, and I think that can be attractive to people who are young. I think there's an element of that in all of this. Anyway, so I feel like it's a space that, when you start to analyze it, the stuff falls apart pretty quick. The arguments are never very good, if you take them in a serious way. But I think it's important for us to talk about it and to react to it, because otherwise it's all just kind of hanging out there. So the person I wanted to share today is someone I've come across a few times. So her name is Hannah Pearl Davis. So she's one of the female influencers in the space, and pretty big. So she's been deplatformed on most everything except for YouTube. But on YouTube, she's got about 2 million subscribers, to give you a sense of, the size of the following she has. Her most recent episode came out last week, and so I was going to show you a clip from that. She's taking Mother's Day as an opportunity to basically criticize anyone who's a single mom. So I wanted to show you we'll watch about 2 minutes of this clip, and then we can open up for talking. Is that okay?
So today, I want to talk about Mother's Day. Why are we celebrating single mothers? When I hear a celebration, I hear something good that has happened. For example, when you graduate high school, you celebrate graduating high school because it's a feat. It's an accomplishment. Graduating college, maybe getting a promotion at work. But what I don't understand is the tendency we have as women to celebrate bad decisions. Now, when men make a poor decision, they learn from it, they move on. They will never be public about that bad decision. What we have now is women celebrating L's. I have seen women try to normalize sleeping with 50 guys in a year. I've seen women try to normalize. I even seen a woman bragging a TikTok account about herpes. Like, what the hell? And now you guys want to celebrate single motherhood. Guys, if you are a single mother, it's for one of 3 reasons. Now, I'd like to say widows are in a different category. You guys didn't choose that. Unless you chose some drug dealer thug that got shot, that's another one. But for the widows out there that married not drug dealers, not men in the streets, right? The women that married, say, veterans, soldiers, I don't know, a guy who just got cancer, sick, whatever. You are in a different category. This is not directed at you. have sex with a guy that wants to be a father or doesn't want to be a father. But then you know what? Well, let's take a step back. At least have sex with a guy that would be an okay father, like mediocre. Like if he got you pregnant, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Has a job. Okay, so that's a decision. Who do we sleep with? We can pick. I don't know. Some of you pick drug dealers, some, whatever. Or we can pick, guys, stable men with jobs that it wouldn't be the end of the world.
I can't think of a better example of women upholding the patriarchy and patriarchal toxic norms than blaming, first of all, even framing single motherhood as something that shouldn't be celebrated is problematic to me because I can't think of anything harder. One. Two, the idea that a pregnancy is the fault of the woman for not wearing a condom. The idea that it is the woman's job to do that is wrong. What about for victims of SA?
I'm sorry, specifically, she said men hide their mistakes and women carry their mistakes like a badge of honor.
Yeah, she said that. And she also say like men take a lot of L's and women do too. But why is having a child only the woman's responsibility?
The woman's shame to hold alone is how she framed the entire thing.
Right. So single motherhood also means single fatherhood.
Yeah. But single motherhood is the badge of honor that she was talking about that should not be celebrated because men don't have to have caretaking responsibilities for their children under the narrative and the socio-political analysis that she holds. John Henrik Clarke said, "I only debate with my equals, all others I teach." To me, this woman is so ignorant, and I don't mean it pejoratively. I mean a literal lack of knowledge throughout the whole thing. I just thought to myself, what are you talking about?
That's what I thought.
Like you're barely coherent, you're giving dumb examples, like it's not even engaging. I'm just confused about why there's any platform for you. Why is anybody engaged in this besides the fact that, like Howard Stern, you're doing this for the shock value and the shock value alone. Because pray to God is not for anything that even if I held a conservative value, that I would find engaging in that crap. Like that was as a creative, like what was that? I don't even know.
Did she really say that if you partnered with someone who has a substance use disorder, you shouldn't be surprised that they die?
She did. I mean, she's really coming at that from a racist angle too, right?
Correct, because you're a black drug dealer.
Is a dog whistle talking about black people. So as the black person, let me enter the chat. Number one, what really frustrates me, and I've told you this before, Margo, is the language that the right use and this whole like Moynihan analysis around what it means to be a single mom. Because what you're really saying is an unmarried mother. And what you're really doing is placing all of the value on marriage and marriage to a man. Because very few Black women and women of color who come from a cultural ethos and cultural fabric similar to mine are single fucking mothers. They are not doing this alone. I was not raised alone. I was raised in a vibrant community within my home, within my small neighborhood, within my church, within my extended family. And that is a story of many, many, many Black and brown children in this country who are raised in multi-generational households, which actually becomes a protective and promotive factor in their healthy development. And that is science and research-based, bitch. So what are you talking about when you say that we are celebrating being a single mother? No, you're just being racist. And just call it that.
But why is anyone listening to her?
Not even engaging to listen to. So it's like, it has the only thing I can think of, and Roger, please chime in here.
Oh, yeah.
It has to be like a deep seated fear and hatred. And someone is saying the thing that you are grappling with. And so you're like, bingo, my reflection, because I too feel this way.
Are most of her followers women or men?
Overwhelmingly men. They do not know how to have relationships. fundamentally. I think it's become easier and easier. You're looking for that scapegoat kind of thing. It's like, why don't I have a relationship? Fundamentally, for a lot of these guys, I think it's like they just can't get a girlfriend when it like really comes down to it. But
So
yeah,
women being the problem.
absolutely, of course. Yeah, no, it's like, the trouble that the incel has is that women aren't traditional anymore. They look back and it's like, well, my father had this kind of a partnership, this kind of a wife, or that's what it used to be like, and now it's not like that anymore. And I can't seem to get it. And so instead of like looking within and seeing like, well, maybe I should learn how to make myself attractive to women, instead let's just attack, just try to bring them down. I mean, when you see a lot of this content, so much of it has to do with criticizing women's standards for the people that they want to partner with and things like that.
They're saying that women's standards are too high or that they're not within a conservative value.
It's super you see a lot of clips where there will be a guy talking to a woman and asking her what she's looking for physically, like in a man. And it'll be like, often it's like they want to be 6 feet tall and they want them to make a salary of 100,000 a year, something like that.
Yeah.
So then the men will respond and be like, well, that's only 2% of the population. It's criticizing women for having the standards that they have, which seems like a losing proposition to me.
Or criticizing women for not wanting to be with them.
I mean, that's really what it is, right?
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is that when I read the Tradwife book about a lot of these female influencers in the Tradwife space, most of their followers were men who fit the profile that producer Roger was saying. That like, if more women were like you, everything would be fine.
Oh, and then that of course benefits them because
correct.
So often what you want when you are espousing these kinds of values is to feel affirmed and seen and loved and valued.
Correct. So you see a beautiful woman who holds the values that you think are important in terms of like mothering and domestic and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, those are the right ones. Yeah. And all of you women who want to be independent and live in cities and have jobs and have sexual freedom and make your own decisions about your body and what happens to your body, you're
the problem.
You're the problem.
So this sounds a lot like as well. Some of our Black followers may remember a guy, he has passed away, but he had a very popular podcast that I think was the genesis of many more since, that had a very similar rhetoric. And he would talk a lot, his name was Kevin Samuels, about high value women.
Yes.
And high value men. And that women, to your point, Roger, have these unattainable standards. And in order to get a high value man, like the one you described, that everything that they were doing was wrong and they needed to present in a certain way, how they looked, how they dressed, how they thought, all of those things. And it gave way to a big rise, honestly, like the floodgates open to these conversations about submission in the Black community. Like I'd never heard those conversations being held openly as much as during that time into today. And so it's just interesting to see how these concepts are paralleling each other and feeding off of each other. Did you notice, Margo, how much of what she had to say kept coming back to the individual? It just kept reminding me of the way that the right would have us to believe that every single thing, every single outcome in our lives is only based upon an individual decision, this idea of rugged individualism. And it's like, how do we even still believe that? It's 2024.
I also heard her saying that women are responsible for their own SAs.
Because they're choosing bad partners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's...
You don't choose to be SA'd.
So you're saying that this analysis leads there as well? Oh, absolutely. Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
But yes, I agree with you that everything comes down to the individual and individual choice and how men don't have to take any responsibility for their actions, but women have to be responsible for their own actions and the actions of all men.
Yes. And then
and if you have intercourse with someone and you're not married, you're a whore. I don't know. Her argument, to your point earlier, like it doesn't hold up from any kind of thoughtful analysis. And so this is where I have an issue with the rhetoric, because people are just hearing what they want because of something that is lacking in themselves.
Yes, yes. That's how you even get to a platform like that, I believe.
Oh yeah. And I mean,
It's not lost on me that she is a cis hetero white blonde young woman who's like by American standards attractive.
One last thing, I actually was on my stories this week, just thinking about how oftentimes we don't see viewpoints like that. And I'm not saying that I need to see this woman and her analysis every day. I don't care to. I think it's vapid. It doesn't help me to understand the world any better to sit within racism and structural oppression. Like, duh, bitch, we understand that. But there's something about the way that we are being hidden from values with which we disagree that is a little scary right now. And so I actually welcome more of these types of conversations because, number one, as an organizer and an activist and an advocate, I think we have an obligation to know what we're up against. Also, it's just words. It is not going to harm you to sit with a socio-political analysis with which you disagree. And I think we have to get a lot more comfortable with that. I do.
So
yeah.
this reminds me, Tashira, of a conversation we had a couple years ago where you sat me down. I don't know if you remember this, but I was traveling to DC, I think, to see you, or I was traveling to do something with you. So maybe I was traveling, I don't know. And I sat next to this man, and on this particular flight, it was an early morning flight, was Senator Elizabeth Warren. And she was in a middle seat, and it, like, I read the situation. She was in a middle seat, coach, and she had two of her kind of body people kind of with her, and she was flying from Boston because she's a senator from Massachusetts to DC. Anyway, we take off, and I say to the guy next to me, "Oh my gosh, did you see that Senator Warren is on this flight?" And this guy who said something to the effect of, "Why would I ever care if Senator Warren was on this flight? I deeply dislike her." And I remember sharing this with you, Tashira, because I was so shocked. And you gave me this really important feedback that I have taken since, where you said, "Margo, not everyone is as liberal and progressive as you are. You have to stop thinking that your analysis holds." And a lot of this stuff brings that up for me because I really feel like we all live in these echo chambers, and it's not doing anyone justice.
Yeah.
And that's why we're more polarized than ever before. One of the reasons, right? And so when we talk about the way that white supremacy and heteropatriarchy is able to perpetuate itself is because we're not having conversations that are uncomfortable. We're not sitting in the disagreement. I think that's where the liberation relies.
And we have to have a conversation like this one, right? Where when she's saying single mothers, she's actually not saying single mothers. And we have to name it.
Absolutely. And I think in part of, kind of what this whole tribe does too, is like, you see, like, they throw so much out there and all of it is kind of incendiary. And as soon as you're challenged on it, like, they just move on to and say something else and something else. And so I think that's why it's important to like take these and, look at them kind of piece by piece and talk about it, because it falls apart so quickly under any kind of analysis. But at the same time, it's like, 2 million subscribers on YouTube is a tough thing to do. That's a really hard thing to do. And so
so that also tells me that lots and lots of people are listening to her.
definitely. And it's part of when we talked about the echo chambers, I mean, the algorithms are what's feeding, right? Because it's like all of them are based on keeping us on our platform. And so
Yes.
it feeds us what we're watching. And I mean, that's clearly why we all are going down deeper rabbit holes than ever before. And it's getting more and more intense. But then if you're on, when you're on a different path than someone else, we're losing so much commonality in the media environment we had before, where it's just, networks and cable TV and newspapers. Like, we're all looking at most of the same things. And like, now we really can like have the same phones and be on YouTube and like have just completely different takes on the world altogether. I don't know what our answer is yet, but I think the way we live, like with the algorithms are affecting us so much and like making these echo chambers even bigger and more intense, like what do we do to shake that a little bit? I mean, I don't know what that answer is yet, but we all really benefit from seeing like the other side, I think too. It's not good for us to not know what we're up against.
And then we get shocked that January 6th happens. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's keep these conversations going. You all sound off down in the comments. Are you familiar with the Manosphere? Are you familiar with any of these people or the concepts that we have named? What is your response to the video that we just watched? We would love to know.
Absolutely. And how does this align with our episode on trad wives, trad wife girl boss? I mean, I think we touched on some of this. And if this is content that you're interested in us exploring more, let us know.
We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks for listening to Justice. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to learn more about our podcast, be sure to check us out on our website at justicepodcast.com. You can also reach out to us there if you want to be featured on the show, or if you have a business or a product that you think would be a good fit for our audience. Thanks again for listening.